Got on my leather jacket thriller. The show ain't nothing iller. Man, I'm a lady killer. If I want her, I'ma steal her. I promise I can make her fly away like caterpillars. So if you don't know by now, then you should probably get familiar.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Vaughn Agency Ask the Expert. And today we want you to get familiar with Michelle Esquenazi. Michelle is president of the New York State Bail Bondsman Association, and she's senior vice president of the Professional Bail Agents of the United States. So welcome to my partner, George. How you doing, George?
Hey, Leticia, how are you? Michelle, great to have you here today.
And our beautiful guest, Michelle Esquenazi. Welcome to our studio today. Michelle, today I'm very excited because I want you to tell people the other side of bail reform. We've all heard about it. It's been in the news for years, and people just repeat it. We need bail reform. We need bail reform. But I don't know that our viewers necessarily understand what bail reform is from the perspective of the bail bondsman and those people who work in the industry. And so I thought that having you on today would be important for that to happen. So before we get going, Michelle, I just want to let everybody know about you. Michelle grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Over 2 decades ago, Michelle founded Empire Bail Bonds. Empire is a family-owned and operated business, and it is Michelle's greatest source of pride. In 2011, Michelle and her family opened up their own surety company, Empire Bonding and Insurance Company. Michelle is also, as I mentioned earlier, the president of the New York State Bail Bondsman Association and senior vice president of the Professional Bail Agents of the United States. Michelle travels to Albany often to advocate on behalf of the bail industry, and her quote is that as a bail agent, she feels compelled to help her fellow bail family throughout the nation. And she's been doing just that because the bail bonds the bail bond industry is a time-honored profession. Michelle will always say that by far her greatest achievement in life are her 4 children, Shayana, Ilana, Michael, and Mariah. And I happen to have worked with Michael and Ilana, and I can tell you that you have every right to be proud. What beautiful people, what wonderful humans you have raised, just like their mother. And Michelle says her children are her motivators. They have gotten her to where she is today, and they push her to wherever she is going tomorrow. Family is everything to her. Welcome, Michelle Esquenazi, Madam President. Welcome, and I'm glad to have you here.
So, Michelle, Leticia, there's a few titles that might have gotten mixed up. Some I might have resigned from, and some I might have ascertained. But I am in the bail bond industry for almost 3 decades, so it's an honor to be with you today.
Well, thank you. And for our guests who don't understand it, because I often hear people talk about bail as, as if it is something that somebody could do for themselves. Like bail, I'll bail myself out. And I'd like you to give a little history about the bail industry in America and the facts about bail and what it is and how it works.
Well, I mean, let me just start with this. The bail industry are 15,000 plus nationally. So we actually matter as it pertains to a vote because we actually employ humans. And we are the most red, white, and blue retired law enforcement, veterans, voters, moms, dad, grandmas, grandpas, uncles, aunts. We are the coal miners of criminal justice, and we are the low-hanging fruit, according to the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center, and all these people that really, 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 really don't like us for catching fugitives in the middle of the night while y'all slept for over 200 years with your children.
Amen to that.
Amen to that.
And so when bail reform came along, I think George Soros was an active donator to changing bail. And it was said that the reason that we wanted bail reform was because poor people were being put in jail we're sitting in jail for no other reason than being poor. So could you, talk to us a little bit about that and about, why that's a misconception?
I mean, I actually can, because it's pretty simplistic. It's called probable cause. A law enforcement officer does not arrest you based upon your financial status. In other words, when you're effectuating
we're sitting in jail.
Sorry,
yeah,
that
a
was
law
me.
enforcement, yeah, they don't walk over to you and go, "Are you poor, by the way? Can I arrest you for a second?" They go, "Excuse me, you just stole $1,000 worth of shit from Neiman Marcus. Excuse me, it's called 155.25, the penal law of the state of New York, and it's actually illegal. So I'm going to arrest you." It's a new thing. It's called arrest. So they arrest you based upon the fact that you actually broke a law, which requires a penal code, which in the state of New York is a 155.25. What they've done at the Roosevelt Field Mall, though, Leticia, is they've decriminalized the 155.25. So you can actually go to Turner Corner at 12 p.m. and crack the case and take all the Rolexes you want.
So
That's
up
a
until
scary sentence.
it is a scary thing because we have district attorneys that have decided that there's some crimes that they're going to prosecute and some crimes that they're not. And so in essence, the district attorneys have now appointed themselves as the police officer, the judge, and the jury, along with being the prosecutor. And so we, the people, have to, live with that when a district attorney decides to do that. But just getting back to, the poor people sitting in jail. Is it true or is it untrue that a person cannot bail themselves out of jail? Somebody else has to go for it.
Yeah, no, it is simply not quantified. To give you an example, in terms of statistics, prior to bail reform, 70% of the arrested in New York County, which is Manhattan, were released on their own recognizance. 70% of the arrests that were effectuated in the city of New York, in the county of New York, were released on their own recognizance prior to bail reform. And that includes crimes of moral turpitude, crimes against human victims on the subway platforms and other places, right?
Right.
So the fact of the matter is 70% were released, and now you have probably like a 90 to 95% ratio. So you have criminal recidivists that are amok.
So if they were being released, if that percentage was being released before, that would lead one to believe that if a judge decided that he was going or she was going to set bail for somebody, that they were utilizing either their past record of not returning to court, for past violations, or information that was given to them, by others, in the record. That judge would then set bail. And if that person didn't get bailed out of jail, it wasn't because that person didn't have, quote unquote, the ability to bail themselves out. It was because that person didn't have a family member or a friend or somebody outside of themselves who was willing or able to bail them out. Isn't that correct?
I think willing is more the apropos word, because willing, when it comes to the addicted, is a whole nother realm, right? So you have a child that has aged out over the age of 18 that is constantly, addicted and constantly offending in the child's own home, stealing mom's credit card, stealing dad's cash, stealing little sister's bicycle to sell on the corner for $20 for a bag of heroin, right? So the fact of the matter is, regardless of pigmentation or political ideology, this is a system, this is an addiction, that this is an issue, a medical, a crazy problem that we have here in New York that is simply overlooked by bail reform. It was really astounding, also with the domestic violence victims. But what happened because of COVID-19, Leticia, is the governor, the good governor of the state of New York, from Albany, Mr. Andrew Cuomo, the Prince Andrew. He decided that he was getting on the color TV just about every single day. So what he was going to do is he was going to stop that nasty reporter from constantly asking about bail reform, because the crime rate tripled in 3 months because recidivists couldn't wait for a bail reform. They actually checked in with their local bail bondsman to find out if it was true. Believe it or not, they altered their drug dealing dates to 1/2 as opposed to 12/31. So what do I
You're
know?
smart.
What do I know? I'm simply and only the bail bond queen. I mean, what do I know? I've only been running crime in an accountable way for 25 plus years in New York City. I mean, but what do I know? Right.
And isn't it true though that families would come to you, would you would develop a relationship with families of children that were addicted or children that were incorrigible or where parents couldn't get control of their children, and you would help those families where you could, but you were the touchstone between that family and that person in jail? I mean, that people don't understand that the bail bondsmen were very close with family members of young people who committed lots of crimes.
Well, I mean, that's totally the way it is throughout the nation. All my bail bond people throughout the nation, mi gente, listen to me. This is true. Like, I'm never going to shut up. All my taxes are paid. DJT comes from NYC. If anybody should end up at his table, it should be the bail bond queen.
I agree with that. So talk to us a little bit now. I mean, so a kid gets arrested for the 13th, 14th time on, drugs, pre-bail reform, right? And the parents decide, I'm not going to bail out my son or daughter because that time in jail might be the only opportunity they have to clean up and to get the drugs out of their system. And maybe, just maybe, we could get them into rehab. But now under bail reform, they're not, if they're arrested at all, they're just ROR'd. It doesn't matter how many times, what terror they struck into their family's heart. And now they're released, and that family is left, in the same condition that they've been, with no opportunity to get that person to seek help and to dry out, if you will, and get the help that they need. Are we seeing, we see a lot, I think it's a lot more people on the street that are high, and I mean, like, out of their mind high, and so much more violence going on.
Especially in Richmond County, my God.
Yeah, it's been,
oh my God, in Richmond
bad
County, you have so many addicted there. It's like batshit crazy. So, I mean, listen, this is something that we discussed. I mean, like, we brought it to the table. When I spoke to the leader on March 16th, I implored her. I said, listen, regardless of ideology, I have a gay daughter. I'm independent. I believe in gay marriage. Like, this is not that. We have to talk about the real. And this stain is on you when it comes to November. It's not on me, because I'm not running for political office, and I've made really good investments over the years, so I can walk away. Can you?
Yeah. But I mean, and it's not a Republican Democrat thing. It's not a conservative liberal thing. I think that what has happened is the bail reform movement, convinced people that somehow or another that being poor was the crime that people were being arrested for and why they were sitting in jail. And we both know, because of our relationship and because of your time in law enforcement, we know that not to be true. I mean, let's think about how many people have been arrested and have been put in jail for a little while for drunk driving, enough to get sober and recognize that they had a problem, or been, able to stay there and go through the process and have a judge remand them to, well, you're allowed to be bailed out, but you have to go through these courses and clean yourself up. How many lives were saved because, a judge was able to have the discretion to keep somebody in jail that he or she has seen before them, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 10 and 15 times, because they're recidivists. But now those people never even get in front of the judge, right? Because bail reform gone. Same thing when you're domestic violence, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because what it did was essentially bail reform, Cuomo's brand of it, usurped the judicial branch. So what it did was it took away the cojones of the judge completely. So now when you're arraigned, for example, there's a certain gentleman that was arraigned a few days ago here in New York. And the gang unit and the local detectives were all over me about this particular offender because he was committing murders and is a really bad guy. Okay. But when he got arrested, they finally put him through. They finally pick him up. They put him through. The judge that arraigned him didn't know about his prior offenses, that he's indicted on murder, that he's indicted on gun charges. Okay. You know why? Because in the Bail Reform Act in New York, they took out the component whereby the judge, Your Honor, is no longer allowed to look at the rap sheet of that particular offender. So, Leticia, if you raped me 3 weeks ago, and now you're rearraigned for raping George, Your Honor can no longer look at that. Do you understand?
Wait, let me understand something. So 50A is a law in the books that protects police officers' records. We're protecting the records of criminals, but they want to eliminate that same protection for officers. Leticia, am I understanding that right?
Basically, you are, George. I mean, what 50A, what it did was that it did not make public, all of the whatever charges an officer was brought up on, because it didn't always have a basis, right? Well, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. The complaints that are attached to an officer now, but for a criminal going to court, if their record, you can't follow them. In other words, the judge can't consider that when they're looking at bail. They have to, if it is a certain type of issue, the judge has to automatically let that person go. It doesn't matter if they've committed that crime over and over again. You can't look at it. You're not allowed.
Mandated.
Yeah,
right.
So judges have no discretion anymore, which means that, look, a small group of people commit crimes in this country. It's not an overwhelming crime. Is not an enormous problem that goes through society. There's a small group of people that commit crimes, and they commit them over and over again. There are people that have committed one crime in their life, and we look at those people and we say they made a mistake. That was a bad judgment. And usually, right, Michelle, judges just, they ROI them automatically, especially if it's a first
they're
offense.
humans. They're moms and dads. I mean, they're grandparents. Of course they understand. They have the black robe,
It's not as if the judiciary is out to get everybody that's in front of them and throw them in jail. There's a certain amount of discretion that they use, because that's what justice is, right? Justice is, did they learn their lesson, and are they going to be able to be returned to society to be productive? The majority of first-time offenders are, but then there's a group that, for whatever reason, and I'm not going to get into why, but they're recidivists. They're recidive, right? Is that it, Michelle? How you say it? Recidive?
They're recidivists. That's what they are. They're criminal recidivists. And it's their job to wake up every day and decide which felony offense they're going to commit. The thing about crime stats is, it's one thing to look at crime stats, and I think it's glorious, if you will. But if you look at the crime stats as someone like me, you look at it from a different perspective. You look at it, they're looking at something, a number, stat sheet. But I'm thinking, how many of those crimes were never caught? How many of those crimes were never reported? How many victims are out there, regardless if it's sexual assault, rape, elder crime, whatever it is, how many are out there that are underreported? How many are out there that these political hack district attorneys, prosecutors, whatever they call themselves, sold bitches, excuse my French. How many of them, how many of them really? I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. In Brooklyn, New York, when you walk down the street, you knew the officer. Certainly you knew the gentleman. If you didn't say hello properly, your mother pulled your hair in the back a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you said hello. You knew the beat cop. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this way. Police officers are common chocolate, vanilla, and dulce de leche. They don't have to, they don't
And
judge
lemon.
you. And lemon and lime and rainbows and
Right.
red and green and
Right.
yellow and
That's right.
they don't sign up for this shit ass job for what is it, $43K and bullshit pension or whatever. Que say yo. They don't sign up for that because they care about your color. Like if you're a domestic violence chick and you're Japanese and the guy that's beating your ass is white, they don't not charge him because he's white. Come on, stop.
Yeah. I think this conversation that we're having in America right now, where we've decided to label all cops as racists and all people that support cops as racists and all people who are not Black are privileged or are not undocumented are privileged. I think these labels are setting us back about 50 years and they're doing nobody any justice because look, you said it, 43,000 in a pension. It sounds like a great job, but frankly, you can make more money as a criminal selling drugs in the streets, and they do.
Exactly, Leticia.
And they do, and and that's what is so attractive, right? And to young kids that might choose to decide to be a drug dealer or to get into a life of crime. It's not a conscious decision that somebody who's well-rounded and has experience makes. It's usually a decision that a young kid makes, and it's not a decision. It's a stupid thing. They get away with it. They say, hey, it's lucrative, and I keep on going. And you have parents on the other end that are trying to keep the kids on the straight and narrow. But when you have a bunch of politicians saying, let them go, don't punish them, don't correct them, don't scare them, don't bring them to jail. Now they want to take cops out of the schools. How is the kid ever going to become a part of society that is meaningful if that kid thinks that there's no punishment to doing something that we would have been taught was wrong? And I think that this whole thing, this movement for bail reform, has had unintended consequences in that women who are battered by their husband, by the way, 3 a day in America die. Women die that are battered by their husband. Yet the group that led the charge for bail reform are some of the people that we see marching today, the protesters that we march today. So now under bail reform, if a man abuses or a woman or your partner, I'm going to be politically correct, your partner abuses you, they go get arrested, they get processed, but they're let out because second degree or the battery is not rising to a level of bail. So who has to leave the house?
So they're allowed back in the house, right? Essentially, that's their house. They're released immediately, right back to beating their spouse.
That's right.
Yeah.
So how is that fair?
Have that conversation. Yeah, you're going to find that the governor signed in a bunch of new charges on 4/1. He put it back in the cover of the budget, just like, the big ugly, like he did last year when he enacted bail reform, and they all voted for it. And then, so now we got back a bunch of crimes. So we got all the guys that are on probation and parole are going to be bailable offenses. And this is the one thing I'm really, really proud of. And I have to say, and I never pat myself on the back, Leticia. I don't make a dollar for being the voice of bail reform in New York or anywhere else for that matter, right?
Yeah.
So, this is the recidivist misdemeanors are now subject to bail, and they are subject to bail by virtue of judicial discretion. So if you're the guy that is constantly desecrating the cemeteries, and it equally offends liberals and conservatives, you are subject to bail because you are a criminal recidivist.
Okay.
So I was able to, I think, and I really do think it was me, because all my partners on my executive legislative committee that weighed in on that particular, on issues pertaining to bail reform with the Madam Leader,
Yeah.
none of them were talking as the actual victim other than myself.
Okay.
And I remember back in the day when he would raise his hand. Well, let me just say this. The last time he raised his hands, we lived in Howard Beach.
This
And
is your ex-husband you're speaking about? I don't think that our viewers understand your history as a victim of domestic violence.
Yes. So I called 911, or whatever. Anyway, they came. They saw my black and blues, and I was pregnant. What they did to him was old school Brooklyn. Should happen back in the day. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not like that now. So all these entities, NAACP, ACLU, BLM, this and that, back and forth, ABC, DEF, HIJK, LMNP, everybody could stand up and say blah, 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 blah. But, Johnny the cop couldn't rough off your ex-husband. Can't happen no more. They beat the shit out of this dude, Leticia.
Yeah.
They bloodied his ass and lost his paperwork for 3 days. He didn't make arraignment till 72 hours. You understand what I'm saying?
I
It
do.
don't happen like that anymore. So we have come a long way in the criminal justice system. So for all of these entities to get up and opine, they're wrong. They're absolutely incorrect.
Yeah.
Leticia, I found some stats that are really, really powerful from, going back as of January. Since bail reform, there's a 32% surge in robberies, and this is as of January, so it's probably higher. 15% surge in burglaries, 67% surge in stolen vehicles. 52 people have been shooting victims this year, up from 40 the same period the year before, which is a 30% increase.
Yeah.
This is since bail reform. Why not rob a car? What's going to happen to me? I find all this stuff very scary, and the fact that people don't make the connection to bail reform being removed as this surge in crime happens is insanity to me.
Well, Michelle, let's talk about the woman whose son was killed by a gang member who was in New Jersey, right?
Gene Rogers.
Yeah. Let's talk about what happened to her and why that all happened. Tell the audience about that story.
Well, when Governor Krispy Kreme wanted to be the president of these here United States of America. Anyway, it ended up with our dude from NYC, but he needed like an extra 25 million. So the bail reform people said, okay. And then he called a special session on a Saturday, had all his little people sign. And unbeknownst to the lobbyists that were paid in extreme thousands of dollars, they passed bail reform in the cover of the night, if you will. Okay, so then it was 1/1/17 in the Garden State. Okay, and they decided to publicly fund the release of criminals and use something called an algorithm to decide whether or not that individual should be subject to bail and remove the discretion of your honor. So what happened was Christian Rogers' murderer, who had 6 prior gun arrests of current, was released to this fabulous program. And he, at 12 p.m. on the 7-Eleven, when Christian was coming out, getting his mom and dad some snacks and cigarettes and shit, he got gunned down. Poo. I think it was like 6 times, midday.
Yeah.
And Miss June Rogers wanted to be heard. She said, listen, I live in the hood. You live behind the guarded gates and you've got Secret Service and shit. I, talk to me, because my son is dead now because of what you did.
Right.
And nobody would listen.
Right.
And there they are still publicly funding it.
And I mean, and it's things like that that people don't realize that. I mean, I've heard people say to me that, oh, well, it's a nonviolent crimes. They're not going to, release you unless you've committed a nonviolent crime. But I don't understand how battery is a nonviolent crime. I don't understand how, gun possession, illegal gun possession. We're talking about, this kid 6 times with illegal guns. Well, what do we think he's doing with those illegal guns? And you let him out on without bail.
Too, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's stalking is part of it. There's so many crimes that people consider nonviolent, but they are violent, especially to the victim. I mean, if you're stalking me, you may not be physically touching me, but that doesn't mean you're not mentally screwing with my head. That's violent, as far as as far as the person's mental health. And the bail reform laws let a lot of people out of jail who just shouldn't be. Now, I know that Nicole Malliotakis was instrumental in helping you, add, I guess, add crimes to the list for where bail would apply. But there's still many, many more, right? That the bail industry would like to see, and not only the bail industry, but families would like to see added to the list to be eligible for bail.
Well, I mean, certainly Nicole Malliotakis, I mean, she's running for Congress. So, by the way, anybody that votes in New York that's in her district, please vote Nicole 100%. Trust me when I tell you that even when Nicole was a young assembly person, she always believed in law and order. She's always believed in public safety, and she's made a public career out of advising all of us good law-abiding, tax-paying, voting New Yorkers of the same. Please look at her videos. So anyway, as it pertains to, this particular issue, I believe that, we're moving forward. Come July 1st, because of the governor's kind of middle path, he allowed us to make some amendments. So what I'm going to say is on 7-1, the bail industry was huge. We were at the table. We brought up things that, others probably didn't realize. And so 7-1, a lot of charges that were not bailable prior to 1-1 will now become bailable offenses. So, judges are now given back a little bit of discretion, but it's still going to be come 1-1 when the Senate doors open. It's still probably going to be an issue. And I can imagine that our association, along with the New York State Magistrates Association, is going to try to seek to, and law enforcement, is going to seek to carve out much more than exists at current.
Okay. So let's talk about let's talk about what's going on now in Seattle and what's going on just across the country, right? We're seeing young people coming out, labeling, as we said, the police as racist and asking for the defunding of police. Now, in New York City, which is where we're based, the budget is $92 billion. 92B with a B, people. $92 billion.
Right.
The budget for the police department is $6 billion. Now, that is not even 10% of the budget. And the job of the police department is to keep the 8 million people safe. And then it is also to keep terrorists from the local terrorists, international terrorists, to keep the international icons that are located in New York safe. It is to be able to deal with people of over 300 countries and languages. It is to handle the mentally ill. And now, because of bail reform, The bail bondsmen are no longer the people that go out to initiate the warrants, right? When people are ROR'd, in order to get them back to court, if they don't come back to court, it's the police department that has to go out to find them, right? If the Yankee tickets and the Mets tickets and all the gifts that the mayor is giving doesn't work to bring them back to court, we're going to send our 43,000 policemen and women out to go get them. So how is that going to affect the budget that is already not even 10% of the budget? How is bail reform going to affect the budget as it stands right now? What have we seen happen in New Jersey and other counties where bail reform was adopted?
Well, what we saw the Association of Counties sue the state. They said, "Oh my God, this is an unfunded mandate. We can't afford $3 million in our little badunk county. I mean, are you kidding me?" So they sued the state. Well, the state swept that under the rug and then raised the property taxes of all those people that thought they had a moratorium by virtue of owning property in the Garden State, which they were lied to. So in the middle of the night, they raised their property taxes an additional 2%, and they funded criminal release. And they're still doing it, unbeknownst to probably 80% of the taxpayers there. So that's something that's happening, and it's something that Governor Cuomo and the Senate and the Assembly are going to have to come to middle path on come the new legislative year, because of COVID-19 and all of the checks and balances that they're going to be faced with. They, the other side might get a little screwed with no lube. Excuse my French.
No, that's the right way to put it.
So I also think it's a little bit hypocritical, right? Because we are sending police officers out to deal with the mentally ill, which they're not equipped to deal with, to deal with the homeless, which they're not equipped to deal with. And now we're running, the protesters are running across the United States saying that the police should be defunded because they're violent and they're racist. But now we're saying that if you are ROR'd for a crime, rather than have a bail bondsman or woman go out and find you and bring you back, somebody that interacts with your family, that somebody who interacts with people who know you, we're now going to send the cavalry. We're going to send the cops with the 9mm, with all the tasers. They're now going to be the ones to go and get you if you were charged with a low-level crime and if you were ROR'd. So we're going to not only affect the police department's budget, but we're going to take them away from actually patrolling the streets and watching out for crime to go chase after somebody that might have committed a low-level crime, where just one thing can go wrong and the situation becomes very explosive. And to me, that's really, it's stupid. It's just dumb. We had a system that was working. I never heard of any bail bonds person having an altercation with somebody when they were trying to bring somebody in with a warrant and killing them. Is there any history of that?
I mean, listen, Leticia, shit happens. You understand what I'm saying? You're not dealing with the creme de la creme of society. I mean, I don't walk down the street and get arrested every single day, but that's likely because I don't commit crime. Right. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, I just want to start it off this way, because if I didn't start it off this way, I'd be hypocritical, and I'm not hypocritical. God bless Blue. Most of my biggest friends in my heart are Blue in some way or another, law enforcement. I grew up in the jails. I started as a bail bond agent when I think it was like 26, 27 years old. You know what I'm saying? So my first heart is toward correction officers, and then to cops, you understand, and detectives. But like, for example, the bail agent, namely me, was working the past 2-3 weeks with the gang unit and local detectives on the ground, because one of their particular perpetrators happens to have murdered someone again. So, we are a privatized branch of the criminal justice system that's always worked in conjunction with with law enforcement throughout the United States of America. And the fact of the matter is, we're a critical component in making sure the victim of the crime has their day in court by virtue of making sure that the defendant appears. You cannot prosecute someone in absentia the same way you can prosecute a human body. That
Right.
human raped your daughter. God forbid. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
But if you prosecute that son of a bitch in absentia, you're telling me it's the same thing as prosecuting him by person? Of course it's not. So the fact that there's an accountability component with the bail industry is what they seek to remove. And they seek to remove accountability all across the board, which is why they have this new bullshit thing called police reform. Bafangul to police reform. That's what I have to say. That's just what I think.
Hey, Michelle, are bail bondsmen allowed to use non-lethal force? Stun
Yes.
guns? Police are not, right?
Well, but most of the bounty hunters, and they like to be called fugitive recovery agents or bail enforcement agents. I'm not one of them. I used to be when I was a kid, but shit is too crazy right now. I don't do that no more. But the fact of the matter is, they use what they're legally allowed to use. If they're retired off the job and they carry, and they're allowed to carry, and they're indemnified and insured by virtue of an E&O policy, yes, they can go ahead and apprehend a fugitive with their firearm.
And I'm getting, my point is non-lethal force. It seems to me, and again, I'm nowhere near as educated on this topic as you and Leticia are, but it seems to me that if a bail bondsman is allowed to use non-lethal and a cop is not allowed to use non-lethal, I'd rather send the bail bondsman to go pick up that agent. There's less chance of a problem. Am I stupid? Did I not understand it? Or is that the case?
Well, I think that's very well depicted. I'll be honest with you, George. I think it's very insightful that you said something like that, because the difference is really, it is socialism, because we don't deal with some sort of computer or socialist, program, right? We deal with mom, dad, auntie, and uncle, and, cousin and wife. And, they want to see little Johnny do better and be better, right? So if little Johnny doesn't appear to court, the likelihood of mom who's on the line for $2,500, the likelihood of her saying, hey, I don't want to pay the $2,500 plus the lawyer's fees and all that stuff. I want to tell you where little Johnny is. And little Johnny is stoned, and he needs the 72 hours to detox. Listen, it's not always pretty, but this is my thing. And you correct me if I'm wrong. Does the sanitation worker have a pretty job?
No.
Does the morgue guy have a pretty job? The people that work on hot islands in New York City, Leticia, do they have a fancy job? You tell me if I'm wrong. Not every job is designated for fanciness.
Yeah. I think that, what's so important about what you just said is that, this is when you have a bail bondsman involved in the arrest and the prosecution and the judicial process, you have that suspect's family also involved. And that goes to what we said at the top of the program. People can't bail themselves out. They need someone else in their life to bail them out, which is an important component, because they may have made a stupid mistake that they are sorry for, and that interaction with the family can show that. Or they may be addicted to a horrible drug and have a terrible disease, and that interaction with the family is support for society, and it helps the judge, it helps the prosecutors, it helps the public defenders, it helps everybody involved bring about justice, and the victim, because we always forget the victim out of this. Always. There can't be a crime if there is no victim, right? There's no victimless crimes. So
George, if you Google that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Leticia.
No, go ahead.
George, you were Googling some stuff before you came up with incredible numbers and stuff, but I'm telling you, if you Google the victim's perspective for bail reform, And I haven't done it myself, but I would venture to guess that you would come up with ungats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already know that that's accurate because I tried. It doesn't exist, and it's really a strange vacuum to me. And it's also where the media fails us to represent both sides. It's their job to be I was going to say optimistic, but that's certainly not their job. It's their job to be balanced, and we don't get both sides of the story anymore.
I think that if our goal here, right, with the protests that we're seeing, and with the very same people that are protesting today were a part of, I'm not saying all, but some were a part of the bail reform movement. They didn't think about the global ramification of what they were doing and that unintended consequence. To just because the crime doesn't, because somebody decided these are the crimes. These crimes are all non-bailable, and these crimes are. Okay, and if you're a judge, your discretion is limited now because you can't look at the record, you can't look at the history, you can't hear from the victim, you can't hear from the family. You can only look at what that was done in this case and make a decision about bail.
That's a disrespect.
How many young people have died of an OD that could have been left to detox? How many people were killed by a drunk driver because that drunk driver was not bailed out? How many young men like Mr. Rogers, right, who was killed by a gang member who 6 times before was arrested with an illegal firearm but was allowed out? How many other people of every single color, poor and rich, would not have been a victim if it wasn't for the bail reform, and to that it was done in such a lie that it was the marketing of it was that it was only poor people are sitting in jail. Bullshit. Only people whose family didn't want to bail them out are sitting in jail. Just ridiculous. And this kind of this kind of stuff should be fact checked on Twitter. But it never was, right? It never, ever was.
No, it never, ever was. And I would like to encourage, people like John Legend, Common, Beyonce, her husband, Jay-Z, who's a predicate felon. I would like to encourage those types of humans to understand the story of the victim and the NFL, before they get behind this bullshit movement of bail reform. I can understand criminal justice reform. Post-conviction reform is the best thing they ever did, because if you sold 20 bags of weed, you no longer need to be incarcerated for 20 years. Everybody's smoking reefer. Relax.
It's okay. Yeah, let it go. Yeah.
I get post-conviction reform, but this is a pre-trial issue. The victim is still bleeding from the rape.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that conversation.
And we're not talking about that conversation. And that's only because, once again, you have people with money saying, oh, it's the poor people of color, the minorities, poor neighborhoods. These poor people are just dying in jail or wasting away in jail because their family can't afford to bail them out. And it bears repeating, everyone out there. If your family is not bailing you out of jail, it's likely that you have terrorized them to the point that they no longer want you out of jail, or you are addicted to drugs and they want to help you clean up. They are families who let people stay in jail do it for a reason. And I can tell you, as a young person, Michelle, you know this story. As a young person, I had 2 uncles that were addicted to drugs, to heroin. One was tragic. He, on many, many occasions, took a knife to my throat to beg, to get money out of my grandparents so that he could get, his fix. And when he would be arrested, my grandparents would leave him in jail for as long as they possibly could to clean him up, to try and get him the help that he needed. Ultimately, he never could be helped. Yeah.
Right.
They worked with the bail bondsman to get him the help that he needed. And Michelle, you tell us, and I know the story, how many people have you converted who were bailed and you worked with their family to get them into rehab? How often does that happen to you?
Well, I will say this. I mean, our industry is a series of psychologists in a certain way, and we've gotten probably about upwards of 80% of these offenders in some sort of program, whether it's county, state, private. We always take the extra step. We work directly with the families. I mean, the fact of the matter is, bail agents are the most red, white, and blue, kind hearted, called out in the middle of Christmas dinner, called out on Mother's Day morning. Many of us are single mothers. We are the fabric of America, and we are constantly overlooked. And I have to say this, and I'd be remiss if I didn't, because I hope some of my bail bond family and my brethren and sisters are watching this. Before it'll be the last thing I do before they lay me down, that I will bitch, whine, opine, speak well, lobby, advocate, scream from the top of every mountain. I believe in bail agents. Bail agents are the fabric of America.
And before we have a couple of minutes left, but I want to let you know that our number one fan, Lucille Chavone, is with us today.
Hey, Lucille.
Wait, what happened to Michelle? Where'd she go? And there she is. And Anna Spiklavaskia is with us today. Anna, I hope I did that pretty good. Michelle, one other thing that people don't understand. So when the bail industry, if somebody doesn't return, that money goes to the state, right? It goes to the general coffers of the state. How many millions of dollars do states receive from the bail industry?
Gazillions.
Yeah. So
Gazillions.
Yeah.
Gazillions. Gazillions.
So in essence, I think Michelle's having a little problem with her video. So in essence, the bail industry and saves money because the bounty hunters go out and they find people and return them back to court. And in those instances where somebody does jump bail, and that money is given to the state because that person didn't return to court, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars each year that goes into the coffers of the general funds of states because somebody jumped bail. So in two ways, the bail industry not only helps to bring satisfaction to the victims, but it helps with the budgets of the states, and it helps with the budgets of the local police department, and most importantly, it helps with the families of the suspects, to get a better life for their kids.
I mean, listen, it's all about accountability in our industry. We work with defense counsel, the judge, everyone, to find out, to make sure that individual returns to court and gets as many services as he or she needs. I mean, big government doesn't just fail with bail bonds. Big government fails with everything, right? I mean, they can't get this shit together no matter what it is. So the fact that big government thinks that they can take over my industry and think that they can do better than me, ha!
But they don't even. They've literally put, how many small business owners have they put out of business? The mom and pop bail bond. How long has bail been around for, Michelle?
Hundreds and hundreds of years. It started with sheep and goats, and back in the days, the people that talk like this, the English people. And, you wanted to get out of jail, you gave the guy a sheep. It was a surety. It was a whole big thing. So here we are all these years later, and, our industry is pertinent. And we are the most successful component of every successful criminal justice system throughout the nation. I would venture to say that every sheriff in rural Georgia and in rural Missouri knows their local bail bondsman. And the bail bondsman will bring the man back to the court, and if he fails to appear. You understand what I'm saying? We're vested.
Yeah.
And we're vested in New York City, Hawaii, Alaska. We're vested in Connecticut. We're vested in the state of Washington, the state of California. We are privately funding your public safety for well over 200 years while you all sleep. We're sending out people like Cobra, like Tattoo, like Dog, the Bounty Hunter. We're sending out people that you have heard of on television and some that you have never heard of, like Walter from Jersey, okay? Like Eugene, okay? Like Patrick. We're sending out Bob Allen and Chad Taylor. We're sending out our beloved humans in the middle of the night to catch the warranted. And these are fathers. These are sons and daughters. And you're not paying a nickel, a red nickel for what we do. You know what? To be honest with you, I don't want to sound disgusting. Let me try to think of a nice way to say this. But I think that the government should be kissing our ass. That's what I think.
Yeah, you're not only saving, the police from getting into a squirrely situation, financially, it's not a cost center for the taxpayer, which, I think is amazing. So I don't understand why all this went down. I'm still unclear. Crime reform, you want to talk about that? I get it. Bail reform, I mean, a crime's a crime.
Money is money is money is money is money, 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 money.
But Michelle, so who's making the money off of bail reform? By wiping out the bail industry, who is benefiting by that?
Well, I mean, it's the politicians. I mean, if you check their coffers, I mean, you'll see who's been benefiting them, and like all these alleged George Soros non-funded nonprofits. I mean, they're just it's batshit crazy the amount of money they have, and they branded us as billionaires. And quite honestly, all of us, and I know almost all of them, we're all a bunch of thousandaires. Like, we're literally just trying to pay our mortgages and shit and get food on the table and hustle, and do the right thing and vote and shit like that. You know what I mean? So, and pay our taxes and be law abiding. And many of us carry firearms, but that's a Second Amendment thing, right? So, I mean, the fact of the matter is we're the best people. We're the salt of the earth here in the United States of America. And we're constantly being overlooked. And the redhead is just not having that.
So I just want to make it clear again, the people that you run across on a regular basis, Michelle, are people that are career criminals. This is their job. They've decided that this is the career that they're going for. It is not the first time offender. It's not the kid of color that, had an ounce of weed in his pocket. It's not the, undocumented immigrant that, was smoking a little crack over there. It's not, these are career criminals, or these are habitual batterers or rapists. These are people that this is, for whatever reason, this is their career that you are mostly dealt with up until bail reform. Am I correct in saying that this is not the little one-offs?
You're 100% correct. And thank you for putting it that way, because you literally hit the nail on the head. The fact of the matter is the judiciary can be trusted with seeing that little Johnny, who's never been arrested before, who left a bar and who's first time DWI, is going to release him. The fact of the matter is, if Your Honor sees a guy and he happens to be, I don't know, red or rainbow, and he's on his 12th DWI and there's property damage and there's life damage, there's human damage, Your Honor's going to set bail. And that's up to the bench. And you cannot usurp the judicial branch. The founders of this great nation never, ever thought that should occur, right? So I don't think that guys like Cuomo and de Blasio and their brethren like Biden and all these psychos, I don't think that they need to circumvent the Constitution of the United States of America. Bail is set in the 8th Amendment, and we have a right to it. So when you get arrested, even if, let's say, there's no probable cause and it's a wrongful arrest in your own mind, you should say to that officer, I have a right to bail through the 8th Amendment. I don't want to be in a government program with an ankle bracelet on and have to pay for it and piss in cups because the government thinks that's what's good for me. I have a right to bail. I am black, green, orange, and polka dotted, and I come from rainbow people, and I have a right to bail.
That's true. And there's what a stigma that's attached to, and we didn't get into that. But they slap an ankle bracelet on somebody, and now you have to go to work and you have to go, around your daily life. That's, you were not convicted yet. You were
Scarlet letter on steroids.
My grandson the other day, a man was bicycling down the road, and he said to me, "That guy's a criminal." I said, "Well, what made you say that?" And he's like, "Look at his ankle; he's got a bracelet on," and he did. And who knows?
And how much is that bracelet costing us? I mean, that program, if I remember right, is monumentally expensive and incredibly difficult to pay for.
Hey, George, I have a bigger question. Who's making the dime?
That's right. It. Let's follow the money on that. Let's follow the money.
It's not the gazillionaire, gabillionaire, quadrillionaire bail bond chick.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's not me.
Yeah.
But Michelle, I thank you so much. I think that the conversation that we had today was so important for people to understand. The next time somebody wants to talk about bail reform, you've got to separate it out. It's not criminal justice reform. Bail reform is eliminating bail for and discretion for judges. That is very dangerous, and it also eliminates the sense of well-being of victims. You have to be careful about that. The post-conviction reform that Michelle talked about, it's a whole different conversation, and one that we'd love to have later on, because I think that all three of us agree that the automatic jail sentences for drug possession is just, it's the worst thing ever that has happened to our government and our society, and it has caused a lot of heartache for a lot of people, and none of us believe that. So when you hear bail reform, ladies and gentlemen, be a little bit suspicious, talk to people, fight back, discuss this, because career criminal, call Michelle. Oh, Michelle. Yeah. Michelle, one more time, Empire State Bail Bonds, and you should give her a call. Thank you for your time today. You were wonderful. All right.
Thanks, Michelle. You're great. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Be safe out there, everyone.
Bye, everyone.